Whether you create your own world for your D&D game or use a pre-made campaign setting such as Eberron or Golorian, you are a world builder. The fact is, the role of world builder is integral to being a dungeon master, no matter how you slice it. I'm currently running a game in the Eberron campaign setting, and I am world building every single time I prep for my games. From fleshing out NPCs the characters are going to encounter, to developing secret lore to be uncovered, to creating political machinations that are going on behind the scenes, I'm always world building. Hi, I'm Lucar, and on this channel I share my nearly 30 years of game master experience so that you can run amazing games your players will love. And today we're talking about world building. Specifically, we're going to be looking at 15 world building mistakes that dungeon masters often make. Now, if you want to start or expand your library of resources to help you run amazing games, you can become a DM Lair patron at the link below. Not only will you support the work my team and I do, you will also get tons of expertly designed game master resources that you can use in your 5th edition and Pathfinder 2 games. Also, starting later this year, DM Lair patrons will start getting access to the alpha version of an upcoming fantasy board game my team and I are developing. We're still early in development, so I can't spill too much about it just yet. Don't worry, that will come when the alpha is released. What I can tell you now is that it pays homage to the tabletop games you know and love, like D&D, Pathfinder, Shadowdark, and DC-20, as well as some of the most popular board games around, like Munchkins and Settlers of Catan. However, and this is super important, this is not a pen and paper tabletop RPG. It's not going to replace or compete with the systems and campaigns you're running or will run. Instead, it's a fantasy board game without a heavy rule set. Bring it to a party or hang out with your friends, learn the rules in 15 minutes, and start playing. Number 1, worrying too much about world building. World building is important, yes, but it is not the most important thing in your game. Most players are going to derive a whole lot more fun and excitement out of the adventures they go on, developing their characters and leveling up and getting access to new spells and abilities, and interacting with interesting and unique NPCs in the world. It's these elements that tend to be the focus of most gaming sessions. Yes, many players love learning about the lore of the world, and NPCs are part of the world and can be heavily influenced by the world. However, never forget that the world is the backdrop, and even though its tendrils reach into most other aspects of the game, it's not the most important thing. So, if you're a game master that doesn't enjoy world building and you don't want to create your own campaign setting, and sometimes you feel bad because you see lots of other game masters talking about creating their own special worlds, don't feel bad. Your game can be just as amazing as theirs or any other. Number 2, lack of conflict. Conflict is the bread and butter of any tabletop role-playing game. Without conflict, there is no game. There are no adventures to be gone on. There's nothing for the characters to do. There is no reason to even gather around the table and chuck dice. As the game master, one of your primary roles is to create conflict that the players can then resolve. Consequently, it would greatly behoove you to build conflict into your game world, the campaign setting. This may be a conflict between powerful individuals, noble families, merchant cartels, underworld crime syndicates, or entire nations. However you want to do it, it's fine. Just make sure the conflict is weaved throughout the world you create. Number 3, not understanding what world building is. World building often means different things to different people, and it should, because depending on how you approach world building as a game master, it literally is something different. You might be creating a game world from scratch, but you might also be adapting a pre-made campaign setting such as Eberron to suit your own needs. World building can mean evolving and growing a game world based on things that happen in the campaign. It can mean making the world feel alive by injecting verisimilitude. World building is all of these things and more. Number 4, if the game master is using a pre-made world, they don't need to world build. I've already alluded to this, but I wanted to spell it out so that it's very clear. Even if you're making a pre-made setting, you will need to world build constantly. Most pre-made campaign settings are not completely fleshed out. They don't contain all the details that you need about the world, and many times that is by design. One of the things that I love about the Eberron campaign setting that Keith Baker made, and I'm specifically talking about the 5th edition version here, is that it gives me just enough information to get started, but it gives me lots of latitude to adapt and flesh out the world as I see fit. It's also an amazingly interesting game world that doesn't fit into the mold of other generic campaign settings that are out there. World building also involves evolving the world, which happens regardless of whether or not you started with a pre-made campaign setting. So if you're a game master using a pre-made campaign setting, stick around because you're still a world builder. Number 5, waiting to play until the world is finished. Do you have any idea how long it takes to create a completely fleshed out campaign setting? I mean, like totally ready. Probably years. Are you really gonna wait around to start running your game that long? I mean, okay, maybe you do enjoy world building, but don't you think your world deserves to have players experience it? The mistake that some game masters make is they strive to build entire nations, continents, or even the entire planet before the game begins. Now, this is great if you have the time and inclination, but when it delays the start of the game, that's a problem. Don't let your world building get in the way of playing the game. My recommendation for getting started with world building is to focus on a tiny region where the character's early adventures will take place. That part of the world, that tiny part of the world, and then expand the world as the scope of the character's adventures grows. So you may start with one town or city. Shoot, make it a village so that it's that much easier. Then build the terrain and environment for maybe a 50-mile radius around that location. Create some points of interest in one dungeon in that region, and then that's it. You are ready to go. And this mistake segues into the next one. Number 6, creating, not adapting. Even if you're making your own campaign setting, that doesn't mean you can't steal ideas, concepts, and even entire towns or regions and put them in your campaign setting. You're probably going to have to heavily adapt them and tweak them, but having that base to start from will probably reduce your workload and get your setting ready faster. This also leads to a related point, which is trying to create in the void. Creativity is hard when you don't have a starting point, but when you expose yourself to ideas and concepts that already exist, many times those spark your own creativity. So immerse yourself in literature or movies or other campaign settings, and then steal and borrow to fuel your imagination. Number 7, lack of depth. Your world needs details. It thrives on details. Verisimilitude and how much your players experience immersion is going to depend on those details. So you need to create a game world that has depth, that has all of those details that make it seem like a real world. Now, to do this, I recommend using a systematic approach, a methodology that will help you develop those details. I realize that many people think that creativity has to be this chaotic, unorganized process, but I strongly disagree. If you use a system and methodology to help focus your creativity, you're going to be well served. I personally recommend using the supreme method of world building. It breaks down world building into 7 parts: social constructs, underworld activities, political structures, religious pursuits, economy, military, and environment. In fact, I have an entire video on the supreme method of world building if you'd like to check it out. Once you're done with this video, of course, don't leave me now. I swear to you, the very best is yet to come. And that's what I'm required to say, according to my script. But it doesn't make it not true. This is Poppy. He's my big boy. He does not clean himself. Oh, you're so adorable. He's a big boy. Yeah. Oh, man. Look at that belly. Number 8, detail overload. And the converse of the previous mistake is also a mistake. It is entirely possible to focus too much on the details, both during preparation and during running the game. Okay, so yes, you need to develop the military for a local region. You may want to know the different ranks of the soldiers and the name of an officer or two in case it comes up during gameplay. You probably want to know what their uniform looks like and what sort of weapons they typically carry. But do you need to know the names of all the officers? Do you need to establish the exact positioning of the guard posts throughout the region? Do you need to create maps of all their fortifications? How detailed do you really need to get? The more you lose yourself in these details during game prep, the less time you're going to have to focus on the other aspects of game prep. The other pitfall is focusing too much on those details during gameplay. This usually manifests itself as lore dumps. In my Eberron game, I make a specific effort to drop little pieces of lore about the game world to my players throughout the campaign, but I am very careful to do it in short bursts that don't hog tons of table time. Players are usually interested in the lore of your world, but they generally don't want massive information dumps. Keep it short and sweet. I swear I have cat hair on my face now. I can feel it blowing from the fan I have. By the way, if you're finding this information useful and love my big black cat, the dirty old man, also known as Twitch, please give me a thumbs up and share this video with a fellow game master. And if you think that I don't completely suck, please leave a comment down below. Something as simple as, "Hey Luke, you don't suck," would be great. Number 9, not evolving the world. Worlds are not static places. Things are constantly changing, and your world should always change in at least 2 ways. First, and most importantly in my opinion, you should change aspects of your world in response to your players' decisions and actions. Consider what happens when characters succeed or fail on their quests. If you're using the supreme world building method, consider how character choices and actions affect those elements. In one of my games, a player once gave the map to the elven homeworld away for a handful of gold pieces. At the time, they were very broke and needed the money. However, the release of that secret provoked the entire elven nation to march to war against the city that possessed the map. One small decision, one massive consequence. And I'll tell you, those next few sessions we played that revolved around that situation were tons of fun, and my players really seemed to enjoy it. Second, your world should evolve and change with the passing of time. As your campaign draws on, make sure that you are incorporating logical changes. One noble family may fall from power and another rises. A merchant that the characters have dealt with before has gone out of business. An entire village may have been wiped out due to a natural disaster. When your world changes over time, it reinforces verisimilitude and makes it feel like a real living place. Now, I have an entire video dedicated to evolving the world based on character decisions if you'd like to check it out. Number 10, not starting at the beginning. 2 important things to consider for world building are the structure of the religion and the cosmology. This should probably be some of the very first things that you flesh out. How religion works in your game world can have a massive effect on the world itself. In Eberron, there is a pantheon, but the deities don't often have a strong presence in the world. Instead, you get the feeling of a pantheon that's a bit detached from the day-to-day life of the populace, or of a pantheon that might just be pure fiction, made up by the inhabitants of that world. They might not even exist. Your fantasy world might not have a pantheon. It's not a requirement. And remember, if you're stuck or don't want to create your own deities, look to the real world for examples that you can draw inspiration from. When I talk about cosmology, I'm referencing the planar structure of your game world. In many fantasy tabletop RPGs, there are different planes, right? You have the material plane and the astral plane and the plane of fire and the plane of earth and so on and so forth. A particular planar structure will impact lots of things in your world, not least of which is where certain creatures such as devils and demons even dwell. Also remember to consider astronomical features. Does your world have multiple suns? How many moons are there? Are the constellations tied to the deities or something else? Number 11, overusing tropes. Look, tropes exist for a reason. There are things that people have found cool and interesting, and thus they pervade many aspects of our world. However, if you overuse these tropes and they fill your game world, one could argue that there's very little unique about your world. And this can then make your world feel unoriginal and uninspired. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, why even bother? Using some tropes is okay, of course. My dwarves always are going to speak with a Scottish accent. Period. End of story. And in my games, if you ever meet a dwarf that does not speak with a Scottish accent, you should be on high alert because something is very wrong. So make sure that you infuse new imaginative and unique elements into your game world. These are the things that make your world special and should inspire your players to learn more about it. Number 12, skimping on monsters. Since almost all tabletop role-playing games come with monsters pre-made for you, it may seem tempting to port them over directly into your world without many changes. However, you can get a lot of mileage out of small adaptations to monsters that make them uniquely fit in your world. For instance, trolls in your world might have originated from one of the 6 moons, and they only regenerate when they are in the moonlight of that moon. Therefore, in your world, trolls only come out at night when that moon is visible in the sky. And during full moons, they gain immunity to fire, making them a nightmare to deal with. You see, that one small change has reinforced the verisimilitude of your world and the special position that trolls possess in it. Of course, you could design your own monsters from scratch as well, and if you want to learn more about monster creation, I do have a few videos on my channel about it, such as this one right here, or over here, wherever it happens to show up. Number 13, skimping on people. Remember that interacting interacting with people, the NPCs in the world, is probably going to make up a lot of your game time. So don't shortchange their development. If you're following the supreme world building method, you'll notice that many of the aspects in that system either include developing the inhabitants of your world or they affect the inhabitants. You want to consider things such as which races exist in the world. What are the people like? Are they happy? Do they feel oppressed? What do people talk about in the taverns or at the market? What kind of slang and expressions do they use? What languages do they speak? These are the sorts of details that make people in your game world come to life to your players. Don't overlook them. Number 14, neglecting the impact of magic. If magic exists in your world, it will have a very noticeable impact on the world, or it probably should. Or it may not, if magic is not very powerful. Eberron is a high magic world, so you can see its influence everywhere. There are airships that float through the sky powered by captive elementals. Lightning rail trains zip back and forth across the continent. Artificers abound, and basic magic items are sometimes possessed by even the common folk. So ask yourself, how does magic affect your world? How does magic affect the culture? Does it impact technology, possibly fueling technological achievements? How does magic affect daily life? How do people feel about magic users? Are they accepted or feared? Your answers to these questions are going to influence a lot of other elements in your world. Number 15, not involving your players in the process. Yes, it is your world. However, your players interact with your world during every game session you run. Therefore, I strongly recommend involving your players in the world building process to one degree or another. It may be as simple as allowing their choices and actions to affect your world. They will love this, trust me. But you could go farther than that if you wish. You could create parts of your world around your characters' backstories. You might even let your players flesh out specific areas of your world. Perhaps Jim gets to design a village and Samantha creates the elemental plane of fire. I don't know. Now yes, there is a high probability that some or many of your players may not be interested in engaging too much in world building, and that's fine. But for those that do, I guarantee you they will be that much more interested in your world and in your game. But that's just what I think. What tips do you have about world building? What mistakes have you made? And remember, if you'd like to support my content and help make more videos like this one, head on over to my Patreon where you'll get tons of D&D resources and access to our board game alpha once it releases. Now, if you'd like to learn about 5 critical Dungeon Master duties you shouldn't neglect, watch this video right here. And until next time, happy game mastering.